Ready, set, go. Okay, so what we're going to do here now is we're going to try to take this and do a couple more layers to it. Right now we have a function that's running and it's sampling color data and it's making ellipses kind of on the fly. But we want to do a couple different layers to it. And this is where it gets to be a little bit of the trick sometimes as you go through and build this up. But it's not terribly hard if you can kind of take your time and do it incrementally as you go. So let's try this, and I'm going to make, like I was mentioning in the previous video, I want to make a separate variable that's going to adjust for our step here. Each time we do our x value here, this is how big each one of these little boxes are. It's going to be 20, and I'm going to keep them all kind of the same to start off with, or to be our overarching one. So I'm going to give us a variable up here. I'm going to call it step size. Or I guess I could just call it step. Each step is going to be, in this case right now, 20. So that means down here when I do my step through my for loop, I'm just going to move it 20. And when I make the size of the piece I'm making, it's going to be 20 by 20, each of these little ellipses right here. And then when I come down and I'm doing my addition to my y as it goes through the draw each time, I want that to be the same step. When I run that now, nothing should change. That's how I usually, when I replace a variable, hard-coded numbers with a variable, I try to keep it and run it again and make sure nothing's changed. I don't want to mix things up as I'm going. But now up here at the top, I should be able to say, like, make something big, like 80. You can see my picture at 80 with 80 ellipses. And then keep kind of inching it down, 40. And at like what point, it's kind of fun to see at what point you can kind of sort of recognize the image. There you can kind of see the me part that was there, and kind of. If I keep going down a little bit further, 20 was one that was still pretty abstract, but I can even go down to something smaller, just like 2. And here it's got so many of the little lines around the outside that's really hard to see because each of those ellipses in that step, they're there, but they're also, they're also drawing the outside line for all of them. So let's get rid of that right now. We're going to, we have that image commented out, but let's go no stroke. That'll get rid of the outer line on all of them. Let's try running that again and see what we get. So it looks pretty darn close to the original image. It's hard to tell that any of this actually has circles in it by looking at it this size, because they're only 2 pixels big. Those circles are super, super tiny. So let me try it with 10. And here you can kind of see that circular pixelization. And it's kind of a cool effect that you can adjust and play with. And it's giving me a little bit of white space between each of them as I go. So let's do 15. 15 gives me a little bit more space to play with this image. And remember, it's going through each area and stepping over. Right now it's starting at 1 in the for loop here, and it's saying, hey, pull whatever the color is from there, the red, green, and blue, and the alpha from that little location, then make a circle at that same spot. Pull it from that location, circle. Pull it, pull it, pull it, pull it as it goes all the way through and down the page, down the image, and finds all of those out. Now, what we want to do next is maybe try to make it so that there's some variation going on with it. And we can do that in a number of different ways. If I wanted to just keep it all with ellipses, let me start with a little bit bigger, maybe bigger number to start off with. That was 25 again. 25 is not too bad. So let's start with 25. And there's a lot of experimentation that I want to start doing here to play with this. For one, maybe I want to start off by adding, I'm going to copy my ellipse command here and put in another ellipse. But this ellipse, I will, maybe the second ellipse, I'll make it all be, I don't know, -4 from there. And maybe I do want there to be some sort of stroke. maybe that stroke that I put in there, I'll make it be just 125. So that'll give it kind of a grayish color to it. So here you can see now in the example, it's making a slightly smaller series of ellipses, and it has a little bit of a gray tint to it. Let me move them in a little bit differently. So here you can get a little bit different kind of vibe going on with it. And it's really interesting kind of what you can play with here by doing these different layers to it. Right now, I'm just kind of playing with those two, but maybe I don't want it to be that. Maybe that first one I really want to be a rectangle. And then the one inside of that is now this ellipse that's working. And even further, I could maybe change the way this is running. Right now it's running and doing exactly the same every time. It's actually going down that page, down that page, down my canvas each and every time. But I could adjust it and play with it a little bit more. Now, I've had students where I was trying to do something similar like this before, and they've made a slider that kind of adjusted it. The sliders that we just did from the color selection for the hue would be great. Or you can use the mouse command to kind of adjust it and play with these ones. I'm going to let you try to experiment with this for just a little bit, and then I'll come back and I'll show you how to do the alpha for each of them as we go. But this is definitely worth a little bit of time. Experiment with a couple different layers. Remember one key thing though is that each time you put one on top, it covers up the one behind it right now because there's no alpha to it. So no transparency or alpha to it. So if you make ones that are bigger in the front, and you'll notice the ones I just did, I made them all a little bit smaller as they are afterwards. So here the rectangles happen first in the bottom section, and then these little ellipses happen inside of that. So if I wanted to just do it like that, it would make it a little bit more square and centered. So think about that when you're doing it. It matters for what kind of patterning you're going to get. This one, I think I kind of like the way this is kind of working out. It looks a little bit cartoony, even though it's pulled from a real image. So play around with it, experiment a little bit. You'll be surprised at what you can come up with. You can also use other shapes, triangles, lines, and play with them. Go wild, experimenting and finding your technique that's going to work for you.